Today we're going to talk about gladiators. These were the people who fought to the death in ancient Rome for other people's entertainment. While these days we like watching football, the Romans liked to watch the fights of gladiators. It's one of the most savage and bloody parts of Roman culture, but it's also extremely interesting. Gladiators fought each other, but also fought wild animals like lions. The place where they fought was called the arena. These gladiator fights probably started around 300 years BC. At least that's the first evidence we have of them. They became more and more popular as time went on, and they reached their height around 100 to 200 AD. The games became more and more spectacular over time. Even the Roman emperors loved them. The word gladiator comes from the fact that they used weapons like swords. A sword in Latin was called a gladius, so the men who fought with these swords were called gladiators. They didn't just use swords though. In fact, there were many different types of gladiator. They had lots of different weapons and shields, and sometimes even fought on horses or in chariots. The Romans tried to make different types of gladiator fight against each other. Each one would have some advantage or disadvantage, like heavier armor or a better weapon. This made the fights more interesting and unpredictable. The Romans also tried to recreate some of the famous battles of history in their arenas and used the gladiators as actors. So, who were these gladiators? Why would anyone agree to fight to the death in the arena? Well, most of the time, the gladiators didn't have a choice. A lot of them were slaves or enemy soldiers taken during wars. They could be criminals whose punishment was to fight in the arena. There were, however, surprisingly, some people who did choose to fight. They could have been very poor people looking for money, or just people looking for glory. There was a lot to gain from fighting in the arena. If you were a slave, prisoner, or criminal, you could win your freedom. You could also win money and fame. If you impressed someone important, like the emperor, you could become very rich indeed. Let's look now at how a fight worked. Before the main fight, there were usually a few other smaller events. These included things like showing strange animals from around the empire, and maybe hunting them. Sometimes prisoners were killed by letting the animals eat them. After these things, the main fight started. The most common way was to have two gladiators fighting each other. There was no time limit for the fight. It went on until somebody won. A gladiator lost if they were too wounded to continue, or if they surrendered. If they lost, the organizer of the fight, like a referee, would decide what happened next. If the losing gladiator fought well and bravely, his life might be saved. If not, he would be killed. The organizer of the fight usually listened to what the crowd wanted. The crowd would shout, "Let him live," or "Kill him." The opinion of the crowd was what usually decided it. At the beginning, there were a lot of fights to the death. As time went on, however, more people were saved. This was partly because they couldn't get enough new gladiators if they all died so quickly. It was also because gladiators were very expensive. If you owned a team of gladiators, you had to give them food, somewhere to live, training, and medical care. If they died and you had to buy new ones, it was expensive. In fact, the fights were not as bloody as we like to think nowadays. The Romans were not looking for death, they were looking for skill. They went there to watch their favourite gladiators fighting well and bravely. They didn't really want their favourite gladiator to die. Some people did die, of course, but the Roman people also liked having their heroes. Some gladiators were very successful, perhaps taking part in over 100 fights. They became like celebrities or rock stars today. There's lots of art and graffiti all over the ancient world talking about gladiators. So gladiators that fought well and that people liked weren't always killed. People wanted to see them fight again, so they let a lot of them live.